Ever since the new collision changes have been implemented in Call of Dragons with the last update, I figured it should have been time for us to update the open field guide as these changes have deeply impacted a lot of open field gameplay, especially with the removal of the intercept button. So stick around in this video because we'll be using the fight against Goat as an example as what to do and what not to do when you are fighting in the open field. What is up, guys? Meower here, back with a brand new Call of Dragons video. So, we're finally gonna be updating our open field combat guide to suit the new changes with the collision system, the removal of basically blocking any enemies from moving up with collision. Now, every single march has the ability to intercept as long as they're in combat or they're just standing still. They're gonna block the movement of any person trying to cross. So, without further introduction, let's get started. We're going to be going through some certain do's and don'ts when you're fighting in open field, especially if you're trying to fight in a chokehold like this, or just plain old, good old open field fighting without rallies or passes or any of that not so fun stuff. All right? So, tip number one, which is the most important one, is that when you are fighting, always try to have your troops that you always use for your marches empty from your hospital. With using the new elixir system, you can choose whatever troops you want. Keeping up your supply lines and keeping up your troops constantly healed and ready to go is one of the most important things, especially for the open field, because open field is basically a war of attrition. If you last longer than your enemies, you win. If they last longer than you, then they win, with of course a lot of other strategies involved, but mainly these are some of the most important things when you are setting up yourself for the open field. Tip number two is always ready your marches. So you see here, I have a saved 5 march squad that I usually use for my open field purposes. They usually consist of 2 mage marches, 1 archer march, 1 infantry march, and 1 cavalry march. Now, this could vary based on player, but personally, this is what suits me and my current state of my account, along with my commanders, their skill levels, their artifacts, and etc. 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 So this could vary between each and every one of you. However, it is always a general rule to always try to have at least 1 or 2 marches saved up as your core marches, and then anything else is just there to help support you, but they will not be your carry marches at all. Tip number three, we can see here there is a big cluster of enemies. When you're fighting in the open field, don't fight solo unless you know what you're doing. We're going to see here Burning is one of the biggest players in the server right now. Plus, he is also rank 1 in merits, so he pretty much knows what he's doing when he's trying to fight in the open field like this. He's using an ally city as a as a pretty much a portal to go in and go out uh, in and out of his city. He's managing his stamina well, so he doesn't really run out of stamina that much. However, you see here he's kiting, he's going in, he's going out, though this is not always recommended because you can see here a simple mistake like that, he could get caught off guard and then get absolutely nuked and destroyed in the open field, but he can just always keep hopping in and out. So you can always use an ally city as a defensive or an offensive position to go in and out and kite your enemies to their death. Next up, when you are dealing with something like a chokehold like this, um, one thing that you gotta keep in mind is when you're dealing with a chokehold is playing your barricades. If you're in defensive positions, such as what Goat is doing, shout out to Goat. No hard feelings, of course. This is a war game, so it is important to have war after all. But having barricades like this is really important to control a chokehold, and as well as having an upgraded alliance tower, which pretty much shoots any cities up front. Which brings me to the point of establishing supply lines, which I see so many people fail to do, which end up costing them a huge chunk of war or making them lose momentum. So, what does establishing supply lines mean? You'll notice here the fight is around 25 kilometers from my city. So if I want to participate and I want to constantly refresh my marches, if I send out my marches from now, it's going to take an average of 2 minutes to go in and out, which is not a bad number. However, if you are, for example, right here and you want to fight in the open field, then you are basically being detrimental to yourself, because not only are you super far away, you're not going to be able to refresh your marches constantly, especially when it's so important out in the open field, when refreshing your marches is one of the most important things to do, so you can always keep momentum, and of course managing your stamina. Now, one main thing you need to keep in mind when you are managing your stamina is that leaving your city for the first time and engaging the combat is the only time you consume stamina, which is 10 stamina. Now, you can gain 12 stamina per hour, making it so you can gain 10 stamina every 15 minutes. So, if you are fighting correctly and you're kiting correctly, usually a march could last in the open field depending on the scale of the battle. So many factors get in, but usually the main average single march can last from 5 to 10 minutes out in the open field if you are kiting and you're positioning yourself correctly, which brings us to the next point: positioning. Now, I'm gonna teleport here. This is not very recommended to do because, again, I am solo and I'm not gonna be waiting for my team for this. This is for purely educated purposes. So I'm gonna teleport here. I see a march god off guard here. So what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna turn off this war frenzy, and I'm gonna be ready to kite my enemies using this city. Now, what I mean by kiting is that I'm gonna do what basically Burning was doing. I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna go out. I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna go out. You can see here this player was ready to go in out right away, but I won't be going out just yet. I just want to explain a few things first. So when I am using my marches, I tend to group my marches in a way that is easier for me to control. So you can see here, I usually use when I'm fighting, if I can use my PC, I group up my mages as control 1. So that way, whenever I press 1, I control mages, which usually have the highest range, so easiest to control. I use 2 for my archers, so they usually end up being right in the middle. Usually, it's not always recommended to keep your archers in the middle because they risk getting absolutely obliterated by all the AoE that's going to happen in a big open scale fight. And of course, infantry I use for number 3. And finally, cavalry I use for number 4. But cavalry right now are not as efficient as they used to be, and they take a lot of skill to pull off now, due to the fact that you're gonna need to um, have a good flank that you can use in order to use your cavalry to be as effective as it used to be, but it's still incredibly good for for hitting gatherers and picking off any retreating enemies, whether if you're using regular cavalry, flying units, etc., etc., etc. But then you need to position your main marches properly. Usually, what I personally do when I am leading a fight, I open with my infantry march, or I keep my infantry march on a defensive position. So what it means when I'm opening with an infantry march is that I start the charge with an infantry. Usually when I go in with my infantry march, if I'm equipping an artifact such as the Greymar's Hammer, it is good for an AoE stun, which helps me catch my enemies off guard and then start killing off people if they do retreat. One thing I always notice people tend to do is that they retreat too preemptively. Sometimes battles can be won even though you don't have a single big player in the mix, but Call of Dragons is a numbers game. It is mainly about the quantity of marches you can field on the open field that can make a much bigger difference. So, for example, if you had 100 regular T4 marches or 10 to 15 T5 marches, the 100 T4 marches will wipe the floor with all those T5s. It won't even be close. You can see here, this person is doing a mistake where he is overextending right now. He is not waiting for his allies. He has no support with his marches. So we can see here another player wanted to make use of this and then try to sneak peek with his cavalry marches, leaving opening the door for another player to teleport in and gain the momentum by instantly sending out his 5 marches here, picking off anyone that was overcommitting on the infantry march. Now, this was a smart strategy that you can implement when you are in a defensive position or in an offensive position, because you never know who's really teleporting until the teleportation is complete. As for when you are fighting in a big scale war, positioning is everything. We always want to spread out your marches so you don't get hit by too much AoE. So if I'm hitting these marches right now with AoE, I'm hitting everyone, gaining so much damage for them all. While if they are spread out while I'm fighting, I won't be dealing as much AoE damage, especially with a mage march such as my main mage march, which is Lilia Velen, which does a lot of AoE damage. And of course, my infantry and my archers also does a lot of damage, but it's mainly single target, and I rely more on counterattack, making myself a standing turret that once people start to hit me a lot, they're gonna take more damage than they actually deal. So trades sometimes can feel strange. However, it is generally accepted for you to take bad trades if you know you are fighting a big player and you can reduce their efficiency on the open field, because you got to remember, no matter how big a player is in terms of power, stamina will come for us all. So try to focus big players as soon as you see them in the open field, because once they're out of stamina, they're effectively useless for at least 50 minutes, as long as they haven't been managing their stamina correctly, which is a big window, all things considered, because you can always take advantage of that. And when they start sending out marchers and you focus them down again, they start to be annoyed, they start being pissed off. And mentality is everything in a game such as this. Sometimes you might feel a bit demoralized when victory could be just around the corner for you. If you just try to keep fighting just a little extra time, you could have found yourself winning the fight that you assumed at first you won't be able to win. How do you break an chokehold in the new season? Because the new season map has changed a little bit than the old season. You notice there are a lot of choke points in the map, there are a lot of cliffs, there are a lot of bridges. So, how can you effectively break them? You effectively break them by using rallies. Now, what does that mean? And how can you rally something you don't see? Before, there are usually some forts on the map that do appear over time with the auger stone. Right now, they still haven't appeared in the extra zone, but maybe I'm just unlucky I'm not able to find one. But as soon as you see a fort, you can use that fort or any inactive city that is out of territory to launch a rally. Now you can use that rally to transport troops and move into the other side of that canyon or whatever. If the enemy decides to nuke the rally with all their marches, it's going to be taking a lot of counterattack damage, because you got to keep in mind, while yes, the march capacities now are 200 and up to 250,000 in the brand new season, the rally is still 2 million, and it is composed mainly of a lot of troops. So it's going to be wiping out everyone with the sheer amount of counterattack damage it possesses. Next up, when you're facing a fortified position, always lead the charge with your infantry. Usually, I recommend having Madeline and having one of your big players lead the charge with the infantry, because infantry can take a lot of punishment and can open up the field for you marchers to go in. But if you find the enemy not taking the bait and only your infantry is getting shredded from that bridge, try to find another position. Mainly, every single choke point does have another position for you to enter from. So if, for example, Goat ends up fortifying this position way too much, and over here at TA we're unable to take it, there is always the option of circling around and going from the behind here, or sending out gap marches across the river using the blink artifact, opening up multiple strategies that we can do in order to bypass a choke point, cause some panic for them, uh, uh, try to open and try to have an opening for you to send in your marches. And of course, as soon as your marches are in, you're gonna be able to deal damage. But of course, it is a numbers game. So if you have much less marches than they do, even though you might have a lot of power, you might find yourself struggling with pushing out such a choke point. However, if the enemy has way too many barricades, you might want to take your time when pushing, because barricades not only slow your marches, they also don't impact the defender's marches, making them have a slight advantage when they are defending. So take your time when you're pushing a fortified position. You don't want to rush. It is a war of attrition. Even if you start taking a little bit too many small trades, you can use that to your advantage and end up building big wins, and which will eventually help you push out the choke point or whatever war or stalemate you have. And my most important rule in the open field, don't go AFK when you are fighting in the open field. You're going to be detrimental to your allies. They might base their plan on you being there when you're not actually being there. It might give off bad impressions from your enemies. They might think, oh, they are always AFK, making them extra aggressive than they were before. Extra aggressiveness might be good, might be bad, but for in some situations they end up being more good than bad because they notice that you have a lot of AFK players. So keep this rule in mind. Don't go AFK in the open field. If you're gonna go AFK, recall your marches or stay out of sight, stay away from the front lines. Mainly, these are the most important things to keep in mind when you are fighting in the open field. I hope this guide has helped you at least formulate some strategies, understand some new concepts you didn't know before, and of course, if you like content like this, please do drop a like. Don't forget to subscribe. Join our Discord. It is free. It helps me out. I love interacting with you guys. I love hearing your opinions. And of course, I will see you in the next video. Meow meow.